Zora flew 12,000 miles to escape her past, only to walk into someone else's nightmare. The Korean CEO needed a caregiver for his paralyzed, mute son. The salary was too high. The apartment had too many cameras, and the locked room the child kept pointing to held secrets that could get them all killed. She should have stayed in America. If you are new here, welcome to the family. If you are returning, you already know we do not do boring stories. Now, let us see how Zora's life changes forever. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it right now. Every week we bring you stories that make you feel something real, and you do not want to miss what is coming next. Also, tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. This family stretches across continents, and we want to hear from every single one of you. The email had been vague enough to be suspicious. Zora read it for the 7th time on the plane, her thumb hovering over the delete button even though she was already 30,000 feet in the air and 12 hours deep into a decision she could not unmake. Private caregiver position, Seoul, South Korea. Visa sponsorship provided, salary negotiable, child with complex needs, discretion required. Discretion required. That phrase had been the red flag her friend Maya latched onto immediately. Girl, that sounds like a setup for a true crime documentary, Maya had said over video call, her face pixelated, but her concern crystal clear. You are going to end up in somebody's basement. It is through a legitimate agency, Zora had argued, even though she had her own doubts. I vetted them. They are real. Real sketch. Maybe Maya had been right. Maybe Zora was making another impulsive decision in a year full of them, running from one disaster straight into another. But sitting in her empty Brooklyn apartment, surrounded by boxes of her mother's things and memories of a relationship that imploded spectacularly, Korea had sounded less like risk and more like salvation. Now, staring out the plane window at clouds that looked like cotton stretched too thin, she wondered if salvation and stupidity were just two sides of the same coin. The landing was smooth. Customs was efficient. The driver holding a sign with her name was silent and professional, which meant the 40-minute drive into Seoul was spent watching a city unfold that looked nothing like home. Neon signs in Hangul, buildings stacked like Tetris blocks, people moving with purpose through streets that never seemed to sleep even in afternoon light. The car stopped in front of a high-rise in Gangnam, all glass and steel, and the kind of architecture that whispered money so old it did not need to shout. The driver gestured toward the entrance, handed her a card with a floor number, and pulled away before Zora could ask any of the 100 questions crowding her throat. She stood on the sidewalk, 2 suitcases containing her entire life, and thought about her mother. About the way she used to say, "Baby girl, sometimes you have to walk through the fear to get to the blessing." "Hope you are right, Mama," Zora whispered, then walked into the building. The elevator was the kind with mirrors on all sides, forcing Zora to confront her reflection from every angle. She looked tired, braids pulled back into a ponytail, jeans and a sweater chosen for comfort over style. Dark skin showing the strain of grief and heartbreak and transcontinental travel. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman running from ghosts, hoping distance would make them fade. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment, which should have been her second red flag, but Zora was too busy taking in the space to process the security implications. The entire wall facing her was windows. Seoul spreading out below, like someone had spilt light across a dark canvas. "You are early." Zora spun toward the voice. A woman stood in what must have been the kitchen area, mid-40s, tailored navy suit, hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her expression suggested she had already judged Zora and found her wanting. "The email said 3 p.m., Zora said, checking her phone. "It is 2:58. I am Kim Soyeon, household manager. In Korea, Punctuality means arriving early enough to prepare yourself mentally for the engagement. You should have been here at 2:45. She looked at Zora's suitcases with barely concealed disdain. Leave those by the door. Someone will take them to your quarters. I would rather keep them with me until I know where I am staying. Soyeon's eyebrow lifted a fraction. Do you think we are thieves? I think I just met you 90 seconds ago and everything I own is in these bags. So yes, I am keeping them close. Something flickered across Soyeon's face that might have been approval or might have been annoyance. Hard to tell. Mr. Han is in a meeting. He will see you when he is available. Sit. She gestured toward a low black leather couch positioned near the windows. How long will that be? As long as it takes. Soyeon disappeared down a hallway, heels clicking against marble with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Zora sat, suitcases at her feet, and tried not to think about Maya's true crime documentary comment. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Zora pulled out her phone, connected to the Wi-Fi password she found on a small card on the coffee table, and Googled the name from the email signature. Han Do-yoon, CEO, DH Global Imports, multiple business ventures across Asia and Europe. Age 35. Estate estimated in the billions of won. One child from a previous marriage. The photo showed a man with sharp features and sharper suits, never quite smiling for the camera, always positioned like he was ready to leave the conversation. In one photo from a charity gala, he stood with a woman who must have been his ex-wife, beautiful and delicate, both of them looking at the camera instead of each other. There was something in his eyes, even in the pictures, something that made Zora's instincts sit up and pay attention. This was not a man who needed a caregiver for his son. This was a man who needed someone desperate enough not to ask questions. She closed the browser, suddenly very aware that she was exactly that desperate. Miss Okonkwo. Soyeon reappeared like a ghost. Mr. Han will see you now. The office was at the end of a long hallway, behind doors that looked like they cost more than Zora's college education. Soyeon knocked twice, sharp and efficient, then opened without waiting for permission. The caregiver from America, she announced, then vanished. Zora stepped inside, pulling her suitcases because she was committed to the bit now, and found herself in a room that was all dark wood and leather and the faint smell of expensive whiskey. The man behind the desk did not look up. He was reading something on a tablet, his face angled down, black hair falling slightly across his forehead, and Zora had about 10 seconds to catalog details before he acknowledged her. Strong jaw, broad shoulders, fingers that moved across the screen with precise efficiency, and an expression of concentration so complete she could have been invisible. She waited, counted to 15 in her head, then 20. At 25, her patience ran out. Mr. Han, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a bell. He looked up, and Zora felt the impact of his gaze like a physical thing. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they assessed her with the kind of cold calculation usually reserved for business acquisitions. Sit, he said. Not a request. Zora considered refusing just to see what he would do, then decided to save her rebellion for something that mattered. She sat, leaving her suitcases beside the chair like sentries. You were supposed to arrive yesterday, Do-yoon said, his English accented but perfect. The agency told me today. I told the agency yesterday. Then that sounds like a communication problem between you and the agency, not between me and reality. His eyes narrowed, and Zora watched him recalibrate whatever assessment he had been making. You are very direct. You are paying me to take care of your son, not to read your mind about scheduling conflicts that were not communicated to me. Silence stretched between them, heavy and evaluating. The agency sent your credentials, Do-yoon said, picking up a piece of paper from his desk. 3 years as a private nanny in New York. 2 families. Both gave excellent references. They said you were patient, creative, good with difficult children. That is accurate. You are not going to elaborate? You read my resume. What else do you need to know? Why you left America? The question landed like a trap, and Zora navigated it carefully. I needed a change of scenery. Everything there was complicated. Complicated. How? Personal. I do not hire people with complicated personal situations. Then you must have a very small staff. His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. You are either very confident or very naive. I am realistic. Everyone has complications. I am just honest about mine existing. Doyen set down the paper, leaned back in his chair. My son does not speak. He has not spoken in 2 years. Doctors say there is no physical reason, which means the reason is psychological. Do you have experience with that? I have worked with children who stopped speaking, yes. Successfully. Define success. Did they speak again? Some did. Some found other ways to communicate. Some needed more time than I was able to give them. That is not a yes. That is an honest answer. If you want someone to make you promises they cannot keep, hire someone else. Doyen studied her with an intensity that would have made most people squirm. Zora held his gaze, refused to look away first. My son is also paralyzed from the waist down, he said. The same incident that took his voice took his ability to walk. He requires physical care, medical management, emotional support. He has nightmares most nights. He does not eat well. He does not trust easily. The last 3 caregivers quit within a month. Why? You would have to ask them. I am asking you. Because it is hard. Because he is hard. Because watching a child suffer and not being able to fix it breaks people. The raw honesty in his voice surprised Zora. This was not the cold CEO from the photos. This was a father at the end of his resources. I do not break easily, she said. Everyone breaks, Miss Okonkwo. It is just a question of pressure and time. Maybe. But I am still here, and I am still willing to try. Something shifted in his expression, too subtle to name. Your living quarters are attached to my son's room. You will have a bedroom and bathroom. All meals provided. You are responsible for his care from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. Night nurse covers overnight. Weekends, you get Saturday afternoon, and Sunday morning free. Salary is 60 million won annually, plus room and board, and visa sponsorship. Zora did the math quickly. About 50,000 US dollars, more than she had made in New York with her credentials. That is generous, she said carefully, because generous meant there was a catch. That is fair compensation for a difficult job in a foreign country with an employer who has high expectations. What are those expectations exactly? Help my son. Do not lie to me. Do not make promises you cannot keep. Stay as long as you are effective. And when you decide I am no longer effective, then you get 2 months severance and a plane ticket home. I do not do dramatic firings, Miss Okonkwo. I believe in clean endings. The way he said it suggested he had experience with endings, clean and otherwise. I would like to meet him, Zora said. Your son, before I agree to anything. Doyen's eyebrows rose slightly. You have conditions. I have standards. If he and I do not connect, this will not work. You need someone he responds to, not just someone with the right resume. He does not respond to anyone. Then you have nothing to lose by letting me try. They stared at each other, and Zora refused to back down, even though every instinct told her this man was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his business ventures. Follow me, Doyun said finally, standing. He moved around the desk with fluid grace, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. There was a scar on his left forearm, thin and precise, and Zora caught herself wondering about its origin before forcing her attention elsewhere. They walked through the apartment in silence, past a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine, past a living area with a grand piano pushed against one wall, down another hallway to a door painted soft gray. Do-yeon opened it quietly, gestured for Zora to enter first. The room was large but not overwhelming, decorated in blues and whites, with a bed shaped like a race car and shelves filled with books and toys that looked expensive and barely touched. In the bed, a small figure lay on his side, facing the window. "Jiho," Do-yeon said softly, moving to the bedside. "Someone is here to meet you." The boy did not move, did not turn, did not acknowledge his father's voice in any way. Zora approached slowly, staying in Jiho's line of sight. He was small for 7, dark hair falling across his forehead, his hands curled into loose fists beneath his chin. Even in sleep, or whatever state this was, tension radiated from his small body. "Hi, Jiho," Zora said quietly. "My name is Zora. I am from very far away, and I am very tired, and I don't know anyone here except your dad, whom I just met 10 minutes ago. So we are both in strange situations." Jiho's eyes were open. He was not sleeping. Just existing in that space, children retreated to when the world became too much. "I'm not going to make you talk to me," Zora continued, crouching down so she was not looming over him. "I'm not going to make you do anything, actually. But if you need someone to sit with you, or read to you, or just be quiet near you, I can do that. I am very good at quiet." The boy's eyes flickered toward her, just for a second, then away. It was the smallest acknowledgement, barely anything, but Zora felt it like a victory. She stood, looked at Do-yeon. "I will take the job." "Just like that?" "Just like that." "You do not want to negotiate salary? Ask more questions? See your quarters?" "The salary is fair. My questions can wait. And unless my quarters are actively on fire, they are probably better than anything I can afford in New York right now." Do-yeon's mouth curved, almost a smile. "You are very unusual, Miss Okonkwo." "So I have been told." He gestured toward a door on the other side of Jiho's room. "Your room. Bathroom connects both spaces. Keep your door open at night in case he needs you. So-yeon will bring dinner at 6. Tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., your duties begin. What about tonight? Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we begin." Zora nodded, grabbed her suitcases, and Do-yeon's voice stopped her at the door to her new room. "Miss Okonkwo." "Yes." "Thank you. For not treating him like he is broken." "He's not broken," Zora said. "He is hurting. There is a difference." She did not wait for his response, just walked into her new room and closed the door before the weight of what she had just committed to could crush her completely. The room was twice the size of her last bedroom in Brooklyn, minimalist and clean, with a bed that looked like it had never been slept in, and a window that showed Seoul glittering in the falling dusk. Zora sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out her phone, and texted Maya, "I am here. I am alive. The kid needs help. The dad is intense. I think I just made either the best or worst decision of my life." Maya's response came immediately. "Smart money is on worst, but I am rooting for best. Love you, be safe. Text me if you need an escape plan." Zora smiled despite everything, then lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the wall, she could hear small sounds. Jiho moving around in his room, the creak of a wheelchair, the silence that felt heavier than any sound. "Okay, Mama," Zora whispered to the ceiling, to the ghost of her mother, who had raised her to be brave, even when brave felt impossible. "Let us see what you sent me here to do." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, felt something like purpose settling into her bones. Maybe this would be a disaster, but maybe, just maybe, it would be exactly what all three of them needed. What are you really walking into, Zora? Zora woke at 5 a.m. body, clock destroyed, and gave up trying to sleep. She unpacked in the dark, hanging clothes in a closet that was entirely too large, setting up toiletries in a bathroom that was all white tile and glass, and the kind of luxury she had only seen in hotels. At 6, she heard movement in Jiho's room, the soft sound of wheels on carpet, something being moved. She knocked gently on the connecting door. Jiho, can I come in? No answer, but she had not expected one. Zora opened the door slowly. The boy sat in his wheelchair by the window, looking out at Seoul waking up. He did not turn when she entered, but his shoulders tensed with awareness. Morning, Zora said, moving to sit on the floor near him, but not too close. I could not sleep. Time zones are weird. My body thinks it is yesterday. Jiho's fingers tapped against the arm of his wheelchair, a rhythm that might have been nervous energy, or might have been something else. You have a good view, Zora continued. In New York, I lived, on the 3rd floor, and my window looked at a brick wall. Very exciting. Sometimes pigeons would sit on the fire escape. That was the entertainment. The smallest huff of air from Jiho. Not quite a laugh, but adjacent to one. Progress. I'm going to be honest with you, Zora said, shifting so she could see his profile. I do not know what I'm doing. I have never been to Korea before. I do not speak Korean except for hello and thank you, which I definitely mispronounce. I do not know the rules here, or what your routine is, or what you like and do not like. So I am going to make mistakes, and I need you to be patient with me while I figure it out. Can you do that? Jiho turned his head, just slightly, enough that she could see his face. He studied her with those solemn dark eyes, and Zora held his gaze, let him look, let him assess. Then, the smallest nod. It was the first real communication between them, and Zora felt it settle into her chest like light. Thank you, she said. That helps. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun rose, painting Seoul in shades of pink and gold. And Zora thought maybe, possibly, this could work. At 7 a.m. exactly, the door to Jiho's room opened. Zora looked up, expecting Soyeon or a nurse, and instead found Doyun standing there in running clothes, sweat-dampened shirt clinging to his chest, hair pushed back from his face. He stopped short, clearly not expecting to find Zora sitting on the floor at this hour. You are up early, he said. Jet lag. His eyes moved to Jiho, then back to Zora, and something complicated crossed his expression. He let you stay in here. He did not kick me out. That is more than most people get. The vulnerability in his voice made Zora's chest tight. He is a good kid. He is a broken kid. He is a hurting kid. There is a difference. Doyun's jaw tightened. You keep making that distinction. Because it matters. Broken suggests unfixable. Hurting suggests healing is possible. They stared at each other across the room, Jiho between them like a bridge, and Zora saw the exact moment Doyun decided to believe her. I have to shower and get to the office, he said. Soyeon will bring breakfast at 7:30. Jiho's medication schedule is on the tablet by his bed. If you have questions, call me. He left before Zora could respond, and she tried very hard not to think about the fact that her new employer looked dangerously attractive, even covered in sweat. Professional, she reminded herself. This is professional. But when she caught Jiho watching her with a knowing expression that suggested he saw right through her, she had to look away. Do not start, she muttered, and the boy's shoulders shook with what might have been silent laughter. Maybe this would be okay after all. Breakfast arrived precisely at 7:30, delivered by Soyeon with the efficiency of someone running a military operation. Rice porridge, banchan in small dishes, sliced fruit arranged with artistic precision. "Jiho eats at his desk," Soyeon said, setting up the tray. "He prefers routine. Same placement, same dishes, same time." Zora watched as the woman positioned everything with exact measurements, like she was following an invisible blueprint. "Does he feed himself?" Zora asked. "Yes. He is capable. Just slow." Soyeon looked at Jiho with something that might have been affection buried under layers of professionalism. "Eat well," she said in Korean. Then to Zora, "I will return in 1 hour to review his schedule and medical needs." When she left, Zora wheeled Jiho to his desk, watched as he picked up his spoon with careful deliberation. He ate like it was a task to complete rather than something to enjoy, mechanical and joyless. "The porridge is called juk, right?" Zora asked, eating her own breakfast from the floor where she had set up camp. "I looked up some Korean food terms on the plane. Probably butchered the pronunciation." Jiho glanced at her, kept eating. "In Nigeria, where my mom's family is from, we have something similar. Ogi. It is made from fermented corn. Sounds gross, tastes better than it sounds." She took a bite of her porridge. "This is good, though. Not too bland." The boy's eating slowed slightly, like he was listening, even if he could not respond. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence, and when Soyeon returned, she brought a tablet thick with information: medication schedules, physical therapy appointments, dietary restrictions, emergency contacts, behavioral triggers, crisis protocols. It was overwhelming and thorough, and made Zora realize exactly how complex Jiho's care actually was. "Questions?" Soyeon asked after the 40-minute download. "About 1,000, but they can wait until I see how things actually work in practice." "Practical." "Good." Soyeon stood. "Physical therapy is today at 2 p.m. Driver will take you. Bodyguard will accompany you." "Bodyguard?" "Mr. Han's orders, for Jiho's safety." That was new information, not mentioned in the initial job description. "Is there a specific threat?" "Mr. Han is a wealthy man with business interests that sometimes create complications. The bodyguard is precautionary." The way she said complications made Zora's instincts prickle, but she let it go. For now. The morning passed in careful routine. Zora followed Jiho's lead, letting him show her around the apartment in his wheelchair, watching what he gravitated toward and what he avoided. He took her past several rooms without entering, but stopped at one closed door and stared at it with an intensity that suggested significance. "What is in there?" Zora asked. Jiho reached out, tried the handle. "Locked. You want to go inside?" A nod, emphatic. "Do you know where the key is?" Head shake. "Should we ask your dad?" The boy's expression shuddered immediately, and he wheeled away from the door like it had burned him. Interesting. "Okay, we will figure it out another time," Zora said, following him. "No pressure." They ended up in the living area with the grand piano. Jiho stopped in front of it, stared at the keys like they were a puzzle he had forgotten how to solve. "Do you play?" Zora asked. The tension that flooded the boy's small body was immediate and visceral. His hands flew up to cover his ears, even though there was no sound, and his breathing went shallow and rapid. Hey, Zora said, moving in front of him, getting low. "No music. I am not going to play anything. Just a question, that is all." It took 5 minutes for Jiho to calm down, and Zora mentally cataloged the reaction. Music equals trauma. Noted. That evening, she ate dinner with Jiho in his room, both of them quiet, the boy picking at his food, while Zora tried not to think about cameras recording their every move. After dinner, she found a box of puzzles in his closet and set one up on the floor. "Want to help?" she asked. Jiho considered, then wheeled over. They worked in silence, Zora narrating her thought process, Jiho occasionally pointing to pieces she had missed. It was comfortable, easy, the kind of parallel play that built trust without demanding interaction. At 8 p.m., the night nurse arrived. Nurse Choi was in her 50s, warm eyes, gentle hands, and she greeted Jiho in Korean with genuine affection. "You must be Miss Okonkwo," she said in careful English. "I have heard good things already." "From who?" "Mr. Han called earlier. Said Jiho responded well to you. That is very good news." Her eyes got slightly wet. We've been waiting for someone he would accept. The weight of expectation settled heavy on Zora's shoulders. "I am just trying to show up and be present. That is all. Sometimes that is everything." Zora retreated to her room, but left the connecting door cracked. She could hear Nurse Choi getting Jiho ready for bed, the quiet murmur of Korean, the sound of the wheelchair moving across carpet. She pulled out her laptop, started researching selective mutism, trauma responses in children, the connection between music and memory. Most of what she found confirmed what she already knew from her training, but it helped to review, to feel competent at something. At 11 p.m., she heard crying through the wall, not loud, not sobbing, just the quiet, heartbreaking sound of a child trying not to be heard. Zora knocked softly on the connecting door. "Jiho, can I come in?" The crying stopped immediately. She opened the door slowly. Jiho sat in his bed, tears streaming down his face, hands clutched around a photograph. Nurse Choi hovered nearby, looking helpless. "Bad dream," the nurse said. "He woke up crying. Will not let me comfort him." Zora moved to the bedside, sat on the edge. "Can I see the picture?" Jiho hesitated, then handed it over with shaking hands. It was a photo of a woman at a piano, beautiful and smiling, with a young Jiho on her lap, both of them laughing at something off camera. The woman had to be his mother. "She was very pretty," Zora said softly. "You look like her." Jiho's face crumpled, and this time, when he reached for Zora, she was ready. She pulled him into her arms and let him cry silently against her shoulder, his small body shaking with the force of grief he had been holding back. Nurse Choi slipped out quietly, giving them privacy. "It is okay to miss her," Zora whispered. "It is okay to be sad. Sadness means you loved her, and love does not disappear just because someone is gone." The boy clung tighter. "My mom died too," Zora said. 6 months ago. And some days, I cry just like you are crying now. Because I miss her. Because it is not fair. Because I want just one more conversation, one more hug, one more chance to say I love you." Jiho pulled back, looked at her with red-rimmed eyes that held understanding beyond his years. "So we are both missing our moms," Zora said. "That is something we have in common." The boy's mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then, so quietly she almost missed it, a whisper. "Hurts." One word. But it was a word, and it was honest, and it was everything. "I know, baby. I know it hurts." Zora brushed tears from his cheeks. "But we are going to figure out how to carry the hurt together, okay? You are not alone anymore." Jiho nodded, and gradually his breathing evened out. Zora started humming, the same Nigerian lullaby from that morning, and the boy's eyes drifted closed. She was still humming when the door opened, and Doyen appeared, dressed in dark slacks and a partially unbuttoned dress shirt like he had just gotten home. He froze when he saw them. Jiho curled against Zora, her hand stroking his hair, her voice carrying melody into the darkness. Zora met his eyes over Jiho's head and saw something raw and unguarded in his expression. Grief, longing, hope. She kept humming until Jiho was fully asleep, then carefully transferred him to his pillows and tucked him in. The photograph of his mother still lay on the bed. Zora set it on the nightstand where he could see it. In the hallway, Doyun stopped her with a hand on her arm. "He spoke," he said, his voice rough. "One word. Hurts. That is more than I have gotten in 2 years. He was ready. He just needed permission to be sad." Doyun's hand was still on her arm, warm through the thin fabric of her sleeve. "What did you say to him?" "The truth. That I miss my mother too. That grief is normal. That he is not alone." "You told him about your mother." "It was relevant. It was personal. Children respond to authenticity. He needed to know I understood." They stood too close in the dim hallway, and Zora was acutely aware of every place their bodies almost touched. "Thank you," Doyun said quietly, "for being exactly what he needed tonight." "I did not do anything special. You showed up. You were honest. You made him feel safe enough to speak. That is everything." The intensity in his gaze made Zora's breath catch. She should step back, put distance between them, remember that he was her employer. And this was wildly inappropriate, but her feet would not cooperate. "You are staring," she said. "I'm trying to figure you out." "Any luck?" "None. You are a complete mystery." "Good. Keep it that way." Yeonbo's mouth curved, almost a smile. "You like being mysterious. I like having boundaries." "Boundaries or walls, Miss Okonkwo. There is a difference." Her own phrase thrown back at her. Zora could not help but smile. "Touché. I should let you sleep," Doyun said, but he did not move his hand from her arm. "You should." "I will. In a moment. Mr. Han." "Doyun. When it is just us, call me Doyun. That feels inappropriate. So does standing this close, but here we are." He had a point. "Good night, Doyun," Zora said, testing his name in her mouth. His eyes darkened. "Say it again." "No." "Why not?" "Because I like the way you react when I do, and that is a problem." "Why is that a problem?" "You know why." They stared at each other, the hallway feeling smaller by the second. "Good night, Zora," Doyun said finally, releasing her arm with obvious reluctance. "Sleep well." "You too." She walked back to her room, felt his eyes on her the entire way, and only breathed normally once her door was closed. Through the wall, she heard him moving around in Jiho's room, the creak of the floor, the sound of him sitting in the chair beside his son's bed, keeping vigil. Being the father, Jiho needed even when the boy could not acknowledge it. Zora lay in bed, stared at the ceiling, and admitted to herself what she had been avoiding since that first confrontation in his office. She was dangerously close to falling for Han Doyun, and there was absolutely nothing professional about it. This is going to end badly. But even knowing that, she could not bring herself to regret it. The therapy center occupied the 10th floor of a building in Gangnam, all glass walls and equipment that looked like it belonged in a spa rather than a medical facility. Zora pushed Jiho's wheelchair through the entrance, hyper-aware of the stares that followed them. A black woman and a Korean child were apparently novel enough to warrant attention. "Ms. Okonkwo," the receptionist said in perfect English, standing immediately. "We have been expecting Jiho. Dr. Kang is ready." The doctor was a woman in her 40s with efficient hands and a warm smile that seemed genuine. She greeted Jiho in Korean, then switched to English for Zora's benefit. "You are the new caregiver, yes?" Mr. Han called ahead. "Please, you may wait here or watch through the window. Jiho knows the routine." Zora chose the window, watched as Dr. Kang worked with Jiho through a series of exercises designed to maintain muscle tone and flexibility in his paralyzed legs. The boy's face remained blank throughout, compliant but absent, going through motions his body had memorized. He was walking before, said a voice beside her. Zora turned. A man stood there, maybe 40, expensive suit, expression that tried for friendly, but landed somewhere around calculating. "I'm sorry," Zora said. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know Mr. Han, business associate." He extended his hand. "Choba." "Min-seok." Zora shook it briefly, then turned back to the window. She did not like the way this man appeared out of nowhere, did not like the way he watched Jiho through the glass. Terrible thing. What happened to the boy? Min-seok continued. Witnessing his mother's death like that. Mr. Han must be devastated. "I really cannot discuss my employer's family." Of course. Professional. I respect that." He moved closer to the window, and Zora resisted the urge to step between him and the view of Jiho. "I only mention it because I knew his mother. Lovely woman. Such a tragic accident." The way he said accident made Zora's skin prickle. "If you will excuse me," she said, "I should check on Jiho." "Certainly. Please give Mr. Han my regards. Tell him Min-seok is thinking of him." Zora left without responding, pushed into the therapy room even though the session was not finished. Dr. Kang looked up, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "Fine," Zora said. "Just wanted to be closer." She caught Jiho's eye, and the boy's expression flickered with something. Relief, maybe. Like he understood she had extracted herself from a situation. Smart kid. The session ended 20 minutes later. Zora pushed Jiho toward the elevator, moving quickly, and did not relax until they were in the car with the driver Doyun had assigned. "Home, miss," the driver said. "Yes, please." Jiho reached for her hand as they drove, his small fingers cold. Zora squeezed gently, reassuring. When they arrived back at the apartment, Soyeon met them at the door with an expression that suggested trouble. "Mr. Han wants to see you immediately," she said. "I will take Jiho." Zora's stomach dropped. Had Min-seok already called? Was she in trouble for being rude to a business associate? Doyun's office door was open. He stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that sounded angry. When he saw Zora, he ended the call abruptly. "Close the door," he said. She did. "Cho Min-seok approached you at the therapy center." Not a question, a statement. "How did you know that?" "I know everything that happens around my son. What did he say to you?" "He introduced himself as your business associate, said he knew Jiho's mother, called her death a tragic accident, in a way that suggested he did not think it was an accident at all." Doyun's expression went very cold, very controlled. "What else?" "He asked me to give you his regards. Said to tell you he was thinking of you." "And what did you say?" "Nothing. I left." "Good." Doyun moved to his desk, pulled open a drawer, took out a photograph. "If you see this man again, anywhere near Jiho, you call me immediately. Do not speak to him. Do not engage. Remove Jiho from the situation and call me." He handed her the photo. It was Min-seok, standing next to Doyun at some formal event. Both men in tuxedos, both smiling for the camera in a way that did not reach their eyes. "Is he dangerous?" Zora asked. "Everyone is dangerous if given the right motivation." "That is not an answer." "It is the only answer you are getting." Doyun took the photo back, returned it to the drawer. "I am assigning additional security. A bodyguard will accompany you and Jiho whenever you leave the apartment." "Is that necessary?" "I do not do unnecessary things, Miss Okonkwo." The formal address again. He only used her first name when they were arguing, Zora realized. When he wanted distance, she became Miss Okonkwo. "What am I not being told?" she asked. "Many things. That is the nature of employment." "Not when it affects Jiho's safety." Doyun looked at her for a long moment. "You met one of my former business partners. We had a disagreement. Now he likes to remind me that he exists by appearing in places adjacent to my life. It is posturing, Nothing more. You sound very certain of that. I'm certain of very little in this world, but I am certain I will protect my son from anything and anyone who might threaten him, including Cho Min-seok. The conviction in his voice made Zora believe him, and that scared her more than the veiled threat had. Because a man who spoke like that, with that much cold certainty, was a man who had done terrible things in the name of protection. The bodyguard starts tomorrow, Do-yeon said. His name is Park Ji-won, former military, completely trustworthy. He will be invisible unless needed. Anything else? Yes. Do-yeon sat on the edge of his desk, a casual pose that somehow made him more intimidating, not less. I had the security footage from yesterday reviewed. You hummed to Ji-ho during his nightmare. Ice flooded Zora's veins. Security footage. Of course there was security footage. Is that a problem? She managed. You told me you had experience with non-verbal children. You did not mention music therapy techniques. Humming is not music therapy. It is soothing. Parents do it all the time. You are not his parent. I am, aware of that. Do-yeon studied her, and Zora felt like she was being dissected. Your resume says nanny. 3 years in New York. But when you hum, you do it with the precision of someone trained. Perfect pitch, rhythmic breathing techniques, therapeutic intervals. Damn. Damn, damn, damn. I took some music classes in college, Zora said, keeping her voice steady. I like music. That does not make me a therapist. No, but lying on your resume makes you a liability. I did not lie. I worked as a nanny. Everything on that resume is true. Lies of omission are still lies, Miss Okonkwo. They stared at each other, and Zora made a split-second decision. Partial truth, controlled revelation. Fine. I studied music therapy in college. I worked in a hospital for a while. It did not work out. I switched to private nanny work because it was less complicated. Happy? Why did it not work out? Personal reasons. Not good enough. It is going to have to be. Do-yeon pushed off the desk, moved toward her with that predatory grace that made Zora's pulse kick up. You are in my home, caring for my son, and you think you can keep secrets from me? You keep secrets from me every single day. I am just returning the favor. I am not the employee here. No, you are the employer who carries a gun and has former business associates who make veiled threats. So forgive me if I think we are both entitled to some privacy. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne again, that dark, woody scent that was becoming dangerously familiar. You are infuriating, he said. You are controlling. I am protective. You are suffocating. And yet you are still here. Because Ji-ho needs me. Something flashed across Do-yeon's face, too quick to identify. Just Ji-ho? The question hung between them, loaded with implications Zora absolutely could not afford to examine. Yes, she said firmly. Just Ji-ho. Liar. The word came soft, almost gentle, and it hit Zora harder than any accusation. Mr. Han, she started. Do-yeon, he said. When it is just us, you can call me Do-yeon. That would be inappropriate. And arguing with me in my office is appropriate? That is different. How? It is professional disagreement. Is that what this is? He reached out, and Zora froze as his fingers caught a loose braid that had escaped her ponytail. He tucked it behind her ear, the gesture so casual and intimate it stole her breath. Feels like something else to me. Zora stepped back, putting distance between them before she could do something monumentally stupid. I should check on Ji-ho. He is with Soyeon. He is fine. Nevertheless. She turned toward the door, and Do-yeon's voice stopped her. I am not firing you. Zora looked back. What? The music therapy background. I am not firing you for it. In fact, it makes you more qualified, not less." He returned to his desk chair, sat down, picked up his tablet. Back to business, like the last 5 minutes had not happened. "But if I find out you are hiding anything else, anything that could affect my son's well-being, we will have a very different conversation." "Understood. And Zora?" He looked up, caught her eyes. "Whatever happened in New York, whatever made you run halfway across the world, I will find out eventually. I always do." It was not a threat. It was a promise. Zora left before he could see how much that rattled her. Do not let him get under your skin. The bodyguard, Park Ji-won, arrived the next morning precisely at 7. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that suggested violence held in careful check. He bowed to Zora, spoke in halting English. "I am here to protect. I will stay back, give space. Pretend I am not here." Easier said than done when the man looked like he could break someone in half without effort. Ji-ho eyed him with suspicion during breakfast, and Ji-won had the good sense to wait in the hallway rather than hovering. "He is here to keep us safe," Zora explained to the boy. "Like a guardian. You know what those are, right? From your books?" Ji-ho considered this, then gave a small nod. Acceptance. Tentative, but real. They spent the morning in the apartment. Zora tried various activities, puzzles, books, drawing, looking for something that engaged Ji-ho beyond mechanical compliance. Nothing quite worked until she found a box of photographs in one of the living room cabinets. "Can we look at these?" she asked. Ji-ho tensed immediately, but did not shake his head. "No." Zora opened the box carefully. Inside were family photos, professional and candid. Ji-ho as a baby, a toddler, a young child, and in most of them, a woman who must have been his mother. She was beautiful, delicate features, and a smile that looked genuine. In several photos, she sat at a piano, Ji-ho on her lap, both of them laughing. "Your mom," Zora said softly. "She was very pretty." Ji-ho's hand started to shake. "Do you want me to put these away?" A pause, then a head shake. No, he did not want them put away. "Okay, we can just look then. No pressure." They sat together on the couch, Zora holding the box, Ji-ho looking at each photo with an intensity that suggested he was memorizing details he feared losing. "This one is nice," Zora said, pointing to a photo of Ji-ho and his mother at what looked like an amusement park. "You look happy." Ji-ho touched the photo with one finger, traced the outline of his mother's face. Then, so quietly Zora almost missed it, he made a sound. Not a word, just a small exhalation that might have been the beginning of one. Zora did not react, did not draw attention to it, just continued looking at photos, narrating gently, giving Ji-ho space to process. They spent an hour like that, and when Soyeon came to announce lunch, Ji-ho carefully closed the photo box himself and handed it to Zora like a treasure he was entrusting to her care. Progress, Zora thought. Slow, painful, but real. That afternoon, Doyeon came home early. Zora heard him before she saw him, his voice carrying from the entryway, speaking Korean to someone on the phone. He sounded angry. She found him in his office 20 minutes later, standing by the window again, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Bad day?" she asked from the doorway. He turned, seemed to forcibly relax his shoulders. "Is there such a thing as a good one?" "Fair point." Zora stepped inside. Ji-ho looked at photos of his mother today. He almost spoke. That got Do-yoon's full attention. Almost. Made a sound, just a small one. But it was intentional, connected to the photo. Something raw crossed Do-yoon's expression. Which photo? Him and his mother at an amusement park. Lot of world, Doyun said quietly. Her birthday, 2 months before she died. The grief in his voice made Zora's chest tight. I'm sorry. If looking at the photos was wrong, I can... No. He moved to... His desk sat heavily. No, it was good. He should remember her. I did not think he wanted to. He wants to. He's just scared. Of what? Forgetting, maybe. Or remembering. Trauma makes memory complicated. Doyun looked up at her, and for the first time since she had met him, his carefully constructed wall showed cracks. Do you think he will speak again? Yes. You sound certain. I am. Based on what? One sound. Based on the fact that he wants to. I can see it in him. He is trapped, not broken. There is a difference. That phrase again. It seemed to be becoming their thing, this back and forth about differences. I want to believe you, Doyun said. Then believe me. It is not that simple. Why not? He stood, moved around the desk, and Zora realized she should probably stop cornering herself in rooms with this man, but her feet did not get the message. Because believing means hoping, Doyun said, and hope is dangerous when you have already lost everything once. The honesty in his voice cracked something in Zora's own defenses. You have not lost everything, she said. Jiho is still here. A version of him. Not the child he was before. No one is the same after trauma. But that does not mean he cannot have a full life. It just means his life will be different than you planned. I hate different. Most people do. They stood close again, and Zora wondered if proximity was just their default setting now, if they were incapable of having conversations at a normal distance. Tell me about New York, Doyun said suddenly. The real story. Why you left. Zora's breath caught. Why do you care? Because you are in my home. Because my son is starting to trust you. Because I need to know who you really are. You know who I am. I know the resume version. I want the real one. It was too much honesty, too much vulnerability in his voice after he had just admitted to being afraid of hope. It lowered Zora's defenses in a way demands never could. I worked in a pediatric unit, she said carefully. Music therapy for sick children. I was good at it. Maybe too good. What does that mean? It means I got attached. There was a patient, a little girl, cancer. I worked with her for 8 months. We made so much progress. She was laughing again, playing again. Her parents said I gave them their daughter back. Zora's throat tightened. Then she relapsed. Died 3 weeks later. Doyun's expression softened. I broke protocol after she died, Zora continued. Showed up at the funeral even though we are not supposed to. Got too emotional in front of the family. My supervisor said I was too personally involved, that I could not maintain professional boundaries. She put me on probation. Then my mom got sick, and I took leave to care for her. By the time she died, I had been gone 6 months. The hospital filled my position. I tried to find other clinical work, but the termination was on my record, even though it was complicated. So you became a nanny. It was easier. Less oversight. I could still work with children without the institutional rules. She met his eyes. Then my boyfriend decided a grieving woman with no job prospects was not worth his time, and I had nothing keeping me in New York. When the agency offered this position, it felt like a sign. To run away. To start over. There is a difference. Doyun almost smiled at that. You really love that phrase. It is an important distinction. Yes, he agreed quietly. It is. They stood in silence, something shifting between them, some barrier lowering. I'm sorry about your mother, Doyun said. I'm sorry about your wife. She was my ex-wife. We had been divorced for 6 months when she died. Zora blinked, recalibrating. Oh, we married too young for the wrong reasons. Her family owed mine money. It was transactional. But we tried to make it work for Jiho's sake. When it became clear we were making each other miserable, we divorced. She got full custody. I got visitation. His voice went flat. Then she died, and I got a traumatized son who looked at me like I was a stranger. That must have been impossibly hard. Hard is not the word. Hard suggests something you can push through. This was obliterating. The rawness in his confession made Zora's heart ache. But you are still here, still fighting for him. What else can I do? Nothing. That is the point. You are doing exactly what you should be doing. Doyun looked at her, and something in his expression made Zora's pulse stutter. You are the first person who has said that, and made me believe it. The air between them felt heavy, charged with things neither of them could say. I should go check on Jiho, Zora said, her voice coming out rougher than intended. Zora. She stopped, looked back. Thank you, Doyun said, for telling me about New York. Thank you for asking. She left before the moment could become something else, something neither of them were ready for. That night, Jiho had another nightmare. Zora heard him through the wall, rushed in to find him thrashing silently, and again she hummed him back to calm, low, and steady until his eyes focused and found her. This time, Doyun did not appear. The night nurse handled the aftermath, and Zora returned to her room feeling strangely disappointed. She pulled out her laptop, started documenting Jiho's progress in a private file. The sounds he was making, the photos he responded to, the way he had held her hand in the car. Small things, but important. Then, because she could not help herself, she Googled Han Doyun. The results were sanitized, corporate. CEO of a major import/export company. Occasional appearances at business functions. One article about his ex-wife's death, respectful and brief, confirming accidental fall. Ongoing investigation closed due to insufficient evidence of foul play. Nothing about the Mafia, connections the job listing had hinted at. Nothing about why he carried a gun or had enemies like Cho Min-seok. Zora dug deeper, switching to Korean search engines with translated queries, and found forum posts, speculation, rumors. Allegations of smuggling that never led to charges. Business rivals who disappeared from the industry after disagreements. Whispers about connections to organized crime families. Nothing concrete. Nothing provable. Just smoke without fire. Or fire hidden very carefully. She closed her laptop, unsettled. What kind of world had she entered? And more importantly, why did part of her not care as long as she could help Jiho? The next few days fell into a rhythm. Mornings with Jiho, exploring the apartment, looking at photos, attempting small activities. Therapy sessions 3 times a week with Jiwon the bodyguard shadowing them like a silent mountain. Afternoons of quiet play and observation. Evenings where Doyun came home and sometimes sought her out, sometimes disappeared into his office for hours. They developed a pattern, she and Doyun. Careful conversations that revealed small pieces of each other. He told her about growing up in a family business he had not wanted, but could not escape. She told him about learning piano from her mother, the joy of music before it became clinical work. They did not talk about the attraction building between them like pressure in a closed system. They absolutely did not acknowledge the way his hand would brush hers when passing Jiho's medication, or the way her breath caught when he stood too close, or the way they both found excuses to be in the same room. Professional, Zora reminded herself constantly. This is professional. But professionalism got harder to maintain when, 1 week into her employment, she found Doyun in Jiho's room at midnight, sitting on the floor beside his son's bed, just watching him sleep. Could not sleep, Zora asked from the doorway, keeping her voice low. Do-yeon looked up, and in the dim light from the hallway, he looked younger, more vulnerable. I come in here sometimes, just to make sure he is real, that I have not imagined getting him back. Zora moved into the room, sat on the floor beside him, both of them with their backs against the wall. You did not imagine it. Some days it feels like I did, like this is all temporary, and I will wake up and he will be gone too. That is trauma response. You experienced loss. Your brain is protecting you by assuming it will happen again. Is that your professional opinion? It is my human opinion. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Jiho sleep, and Zora felt the last of her professional distance crumbling. Can I ask you something? Do-yeon said. Yes. Do you regret coming here? No. Even though I am difficult and secretive, and your employer is probably entangled in things you should run from? Even though all of that. Why? Zora turned to look at him, found him, already watching her. Because Jiho deserves someone who will fight for him. And because, difficult and secretive aside, I think you are a good father, trying your best in an impossible situation. You think too highly of me, or you think too little of yourself. His mouth curved, almost a smile. There is a difference. There is, Zora agreed, smiling back. They held eye contact, and the moment stretched, became something else, something Zora knew she should break, but could not quite make herself. You are dangerous, Do-yeon said softly. Me? You were the one with the gun. Not that kind of dangerous. His hand moved, just slightly, enough that his fingers brushed hers on the floor between them. The kind that makes me forget why I should not want this. Zora's heart hammered. Want what? You know what. She did. She absolutely did. We should not, she said, even as her fingers curled slightly into his. I know. I work for you. I know. This is completely inappropriate. I know. Neither of them moved apart. Do-yeon, Zora whispered. The sound of his name in her voice seemed to break something in him. He turned toward her, and Zora knew with absolute clarity that he was going to kiss her, and she was going to let him, and it was going to complicate everything. But before either of them could close the distance, Jiho stirred in his sleep, made a small sound, and reality crashed back. They broke apart, stood simultaneously, and Do-yeon moved to his son's bedside, checking on him with gentle hands. He is fine, he said quietly. Just dreaming. I should go, Zora said. Let him. She fled before she could finish the sentence, back to her room where she closed the door and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. What are you doing? But she knew what she was doing. She was falling for a man she should not fall for, in a situation that could only end badly, and she did not know how to stop. What scares you more, the danger he represents, or how much you want him anyway? Morning came with news that shattered the fragile peace. Zora woke to raised voices in the hallway, Do-yeon's and So-yeon's, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like an argument. She pulled on her robe, opened her door just as Do-yeon strode past without seeing her, his phone pressed to his ear, his face carved from stone. So-yeon appeared moments later. Get Jiho ready. We are leaving in 30 minutes. Leaving where? Safe house. There's been a threat. Ice flooded Zora's system. What kind of threat? The kind Mr. Han takes seriously. 30 minutes. Pack essentials only. So-yeon disappeared before Zora could ask anything else. Jiho was already awake, sitting up in bed, eyes wide with fear. He had heard the commotion, understood enough to know something was wrong. Hey, Zora said, forcing calm into her voice. We're going on a little trip, okay? Just for a few days. An adventure. The boy's hand started shaking. I We'll be with you the whole time. Your dad will be there. Nurse Choi, everyone you know. We are just changing locations for a bit." Jiho grabbed his pillow, held it against his chest like armor. Zora packed quickly, her mind racing. A threat serious enough to evacuate meant Cho Min-seok had escalated, or someone else had entered the picture. Either way, the danger she had sensed from the beginning was no longer theoretical. The safe house turned out to be a compound outside Seoul, surrounded by walls and guards, and enough security to protect a president. The main building was modern, all concrete and glass, beautiful in a cold utilitarian way. Doyun met them in the entrance, his expression grim. "Second floor, east wing. Soyeon will show you. Do not go outside without Ji-won. Do not answer the door for anyone except staff I have personally introduced you to." "How long will we be here?" Zora asked. "Until I neutralize the threat." "And how will you do that?" His eyes met hers, and what she saw there made her stomach drop. "However I need to." He left before she could respond, and Zora understood with perfect clarity that Han Do-yeon was about to do something dangerous, possibly violent, definitely illegal. The rooms Soyeon showed them were comfortable, but felt like a cage. Jiho's space connected to Zora's again, both opening onto a shared living area. Everything they might need had been provided: clothes in the right sizes, toiletries, food, entertainment, a beautiful prison. "Mr. Han will return when he can," Soyeon said. "Until then, maintain routine as much as possible, for Jiho's sake. Routine, as if anything about this was routine." The first day crawled past. Zora tried to keep Jiho occupied, but the boy could sense her anxiety, fed off it, became more withdrawn than he had been in days. By evening, he was curled in a ball on his bed, hands over his ears, even though there was no sound. Nurse Choi tried to help, but nothing worked until Zora did, something desperate. She went to the piano she had seen in the main living area, sat down, and started to play. Just chords at first, simple and soft. Then a melody, something her mother had taught her, a Nigerian lullaby that translated to "Peace, be still." She heard Jiho before she saw him, the shuffle of his feet on the hardwood floor. When she glanced over, he stood in the doorway, hands no longer over his ears, staring at her with an expression she could not read. Zora kept playing, shifted into a Korean folk song she had researched, one of the ones Jiho's mother used to sing. She did not know the words, just hummed the melody, let the piano carry the emotion. Jiho moved closer, one step at a time, until he stood beside the piano bench. "You can sit if you want," Zora said softly, still playing. The boy climbed up beside her, careful not to touch the keys, just sat and listened. Zora played for 20 minutes, cycling through every gentle song she knew, and when she finally stopped, Jiho's hand reached out and touched middle C. One note, clear and pure. "That is a good note," Zora said. Jiho pressed it again, then D, then E. A scale, uncertain, but intentional. "You remember," Zora whispered. The boy looked up at her, and his mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then, so quiet it was barely audible, a single word. "Yama." "Mother." Zora's eyes filled with tears. "Yes. Your Yama taught you music." Jiho's face crumpled, and the tears that had not fallen during nightmares, during trauma, during 2 years of silence, finally came. He sobbed like his heart was breaking, and Zora pulled him into her arms and held him while he shattered and started to piece back together. When Do-yoon returned 3 hours later, covered in what looked like someone else's blood, he found them still at the piano. Jiho asleep against Zora's shoulder, her hand gently playing one-handed melodies, while the boy dreamed. Do-yoon stopped in the doorway, and Zora looked, up to find his expression completely unguarded. Shock, relief, fear, hope, all cycling across his face too fast to catalog. He spoke, Zora said quietly. Do-yun's knees seemed to give out. He sat heavily on the nearest chair, stared at his son like he was witnessing a miracle. What did he say? Iyama. Something broke in Do-yun's expression. Grief and joy tangled together. That was his first word. As a baby. Iyama. It makes sense it would be his first word again. What did you do? I played piano. He came to me. I think he has been ready for a while. He just needed permission to remember, without it destroying him. Do-yun stood, moved closer, and Zora saw the blood on his knuckles, the torn shirt, the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. Are you hurt? She asked. No. Is the threat gone? Being handled. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have right now. He looked at Jiho, reached out and touched his son's hair with a gentleness that contradicted the violence evidenced on his hands. I need to clean up. Can you put him to bed? Of course. Do-yun started to leave. Stopped. Zora. Yes. Thank you. For everything. For being exactly what he needed when I could not be. The words settled into her chest, warm and painful. You are what he needs, Do-yun. I am just helping you both find your way back to each other. He held her gaze, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You are much more than that. Then he left, and Zora was alone with a sleeping child and the weight of feelings she could no longer deny. She carried Jiho to bed, tucked him in, and sat beside him until his sleep deepened. Then she went looking for Do-yun. She found him in a bathroom attached to what must have been his room, washing blood from his hands with mechanical precision. He had stripped off his shirt, and Zora could see bruises forming on his ribs, a cut across his shoulder. You said you were not hurt, she said from the doorway. He looked up, saw her in the mirror. These do not count. What does count then? Broken bones? Bullet wounds? Do not start. I am not starting anything. I am asking if you are okay. I'm fine. You are bleeding. Barely. Zora moved into the bathroom, took the washcloth from his hands. Sit down. Zora. Sit. Down. He sat on the edge of the bathtub, and she cleaned the cut on his shoulder with careful hands. It was not deep, would not need stitches, but it looked painful. What happened? She asked. I had a conversation with Cho Min-seok. That is a very polite way of saying you beat someone up. I did not say it was a polite conversation. Despite everything, Zora almost smiled. Is he going to be a problem anymore? No. How can you be sure? Because I made him understand what would happen if he continued to be one. The cold certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, she felt oddly safe, protected by a man who would clearly do terrible things to keep his family from harm. When did you start thinking of yourself as part of his family? All done, she said, stepping back. Do-yun caught her wrist, held her in place. Why are you really here? Not in Korea. Here, in this bathroom, taking care of me. Because someone needs to. That is not an answer. It is the truth. Not all of it. Zora looked down at where his fingers circled her wrist, his thumb resting against her pulse point. He could feel her heart racing, knew exactly what effect he had on her. What do you want me to say? She asked. The real reason. You know the real reason. Say it anyway. The air between them felt combustible, and Zora knew she was standing at a precipice. She could step back, maintain the fiction of professionalism, or she could jump and deal with the consequences. Because when I am near you, she said quietly, I forget all the reasons I should keep my distance. Do-yun's eyes darkened. That makes two of us. He pulled her closer, and Zora went, let herself be drawn into the space between his knees, his hand settling on her hips, with a possessiveness that should have felt presumptuous, but instead felt right. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "The worst. I work for you. I know. We should not do this." "Probably not." Neither of them moved away. "Zora," Do-yeon said, his voice rough, "if you are going to run, do it now. Because if you stay, I am going to kiss you, and I am not going to be professional about it." Her pulse thundered. "What if I don't want you to be professional?" His control snapped. He stood, hauled her against him, and kissed her like he had been starving for it. Like she was air, and he had been drowning. His hands tangled in her braids, angled her head for better access, and Zora kissed him back with equal desperation. 2 years of loneliness and loss and grief pouring into the connection. It was not gentle. It was not careful. It was raw and honest and absolutely inappropriate, and Zora could not bring herself to care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Do-yeon rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since you argued with me in my office on your first day. That was barely a week ago. Longest week of my life." Zora laughed, breathless. "This is insane. Completely. We have to set boundaries, rules. I am still Jiho's caregiver. That has to come first." "Agreed. And we cannot. We should not. Not while I am employed by you. Technically, my company employs you. I could transfer the contract to a third-party management service, keep everything separate. You have really thought about this." "I have thought about nothing else for days." His hands moved to cup her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Tell me I am not alone in this. Tell me you feel it too." "I feel it," Zora admitted. "I feel it so much it terrifies me." "Good. Terror means it matters. That is twisted logic. I am a twisted man. You are a dangerous man with a complicated life and enemies who make threats. And yet you are still here. And yet I am still here," she echoed. He kissed her again, softer this time, a question rather than a demand. Zora answered it by threading her fingers through his hair, pulling him closer, and Do-yeon made a sound low in his throat that sent heat pooling through her entire body. When they broke apart this time, his eyes were nearly black with want. "We should stop. We should. Before this goes somewhere we cannot take back." "Definitely." Neither of them moved. "Do-yeon," Zora said, her voice shaky, "I need you to make me leave, because my self-control is completely gone." He groaned, stepped back, put physical distance between them. "You are going to be the death of me. Feeling is mutual." They stared at each other across 3 feet of space that felt like an ocean. "Tomorrow," Do-yeon said, "tomorrow we figure out how to do this properly. Tonight, we both need sleep and distance and common sense. Practical. I am a practical man. You are a man who just kissed me in your bathroom after beating up your enemy. Practical is not the word I would use." His mouth curved into a real smile, the first she had seen from him, and it transformed his entire face. "Get out of here before I change my mind about being practical." Zora left, but she could feel his eyes on her the entire way to the door. In her room, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her lips still tingling, her heart still racing, and tried to convince herself that kissing her employer wasn't a catastrophic mistake. She failed completely. But she also could not bring herself to regret it. "What have you done?" The next morning brought clarity in an unexpected form. Zora woke to find Jiho standing beside her bed, staring at her with those solemn, dark eyes. "Hey," she said, sitting up. "Everything okay?" Jiho opened his mouth, and after a pause that felt eternal, spoke. "Piano?" One word, but it was a word, a request, communication. "You want to play piano?" A nod. "Okay." Let me get dressed, then we will go play. They spent the morning at the piano, Jiho picking out melodies he remembered, Zora filling in harmonies, and slowly, painfully, the boy began to speak. One word at a time, long pauses between them, but real language emerging from 2 years of silence. Good. More. Pretty. Iyama sang. Each word felt like a gift, and Zora cataloged them carefully, celebrated them quietly, gave Jiho space to find his voice at his own pace. Doyun found them after lunch, and his expression when Jiho looked up and said, "Appa," nearly broke Zora's heart. "Yes," Doyun said, his voice thick. "I am here." Jiho slid off the piano bench, walked to his father, and hugged him. Just wrapped his small arms around Doyun's waist and held on. Doyun looked at Zora over his son's head, and the gratitude and emotion in his eyes said everything. Words could not. That evening, after Jiho was asleep, Doyun came to find her. "Walk with me?" They walked through the compound grounds, Jiwon shadowing at a discreet distance, the night air cold and clear. "I transferred your employment contract," Doyun said. "As of this morning, you are employed by a third-party agency that provides my household staffing. I am no longer technically your employer." Zora stopped walking. "You did what?" "Removed the conflict of interest. You said we needed boundaries. I am establishing them." "That seems extreme." "I do not do anything halfway, Zora. You should know that by now." "So what? Now we can just—" "What exactly?" He turned to face her, took her hands in his. "Now I can take you to dinner without it being inappropriate. Now I can tell you that I have not stopped thinking about kissing you since last night. Now I can ask if you want this, really want this, without the power, dynamic making your answer suspect." Zora's heart hammered. "You restructured my entire employment so you could take me on a date?" "Yes. That is insane. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. Is that a no?" Zora looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, the careful hope in his expression. "It is a, I must be as insane as you are, because yes." The smile that broke across his face was worth every complication that would follow. "There is something else," Doyun said, his expression turning serious. "The locked room, Jiho's mother's room. I am going to open it. I think he's ready. But I want you there. For him, and for me. Of course." They returned to the compound 2 days later. The threat neutralized, life returning to something resembling normal. The apartment felt different now, or maybe Zora felt different in it. But either way, everything had shifted. Doyun gathered them in the hallway outside the locked door that afternoon. Jiho, between them, Nurse Choi and Soyeon, present for support. "We are going to go inside," Doyun told his son in Korean, then English for Zora's benefit. "Yuriyama's room. If you want to leave at any time, we leave. Okay?" Jiho nodded, slipped his hand into Zora's, then reached for his father's hand too. Together, they opened the door. The room was exactly as his mother had left it. Piano against one wall, music sheets scattered across the bench, photographs on every surface. It smelled stale, untouched, but also unmistakably like the woman in all those photos. Her presence lingered like perfume. Jiho stood frozen in the doorway, then slowly walked to the piano. He touched the keys with reverent fingers, and then he spoke, more words than Zora had heard from him all at once. Iyama was singing, happy song. Then phone rang. She answered, got scared. Man was yelling. She went to balcony, told me stay inside. Jiho's voice shook but held. I followed. She was crying. Man was there. On balcony. They fought. He pushed her. The words fell like bombs. Doyun went very still. A man was there? On the balcony? Jiho nodded. Bad man, scary face. Did you recognize him? Another nod. Iyama's friend. Came to house sometimes. Zora watched Doyun's expression cycle through shock, rage, grief, and finally, cold calculation. Cho Min-seok, he said quietly. You knew? Zora asked. I suspected. Could never prove it. The police said accident because there was no evidence of anyone else being there. He looked down at his son. You saw him? You are sure? Yes, Appa. He pushed Iyama. Then saw me. Said I imagined it. Said if I told, he would hurt you. The puzzle pieces fell into place. Jiho had not stopped speaking from trauma alone. He had stopped because he was threatened into silence by a man who murdered his mother. Doyun pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke rapid Korean. When he ended it, his expression was carved from ice. I need to make this right, he said to Zora. Can you stay with Jiho? What are you going to do? What I should have done 2 years ago. Doyun, do not do anything that will take you away from him. He just got you back. Both of you. Do not throw that away for revenge. His expression softened slightly. Not revenge. Justice. There is a difference. That phrase again, coming full circle. He knelt in front of Jiho. You are the bravest person I know. What you just did, telling the truth, that took more courage than anything I have ever done. I am so proud of you. Will a bad man hurt you? Jiho asked. No, I promise. The bad man will never hurt anyone again. Whatever Doyun did, it was handled quietly and completely. Cho Min-seok disappeared from Seoul, rumors suggesting he fled the country one step ahead of authorities, armed with new evidence of murder. The investigation into Jiho's mother's death was reopened, reclassified, closed again, with findings that vindicated her memory. Doyun never gave Zora details, and she never asked. 3 weeks later, Jiho was speaking in full sentences, attending school part-time, laughing at jokes. The paralysis remained, would likely always remain, but he adapted with the resilience of children everywhere. And Zora stayed, not as a caregiver anymore, but as part of the family in ways that defied easy definition. The first real date happened on a Saturday. Doyun took her to a restaurant overlooking the Han River. Private room, incredible food, conversation that flowed like they had known each other for years instead of weeks. I am leaving the business, he told her over dessert. The illegal parts. I have enough legitimate ventures to support us without the danger. I want Jiho to have a normal life, as normal as possible. That is a big change. I have a reason to change now. 2 reasons, actually. He reached across the table, took her hand, and Zora let herself believe that maybe, possibly, this could work. 6 months later, she was sure. Jiho called her Zora Aoyama, a term of endearment that made her cry the first time. Doyun looked at her like she hung the moon, and Zora finally understood that running to Korea had not been about escape. It had been about finding home in the last place she expected. They were sitting on the balcony, the one where Jiho used to eat breakfast with his mother, reclaimed now as a space of healing rather than grief. Jiho was at school, Zora and Doyun stealing a quiet moment before the afternoon chaos. I love you, Doyun said, casual as commenting on the weather. Zora looked at him, saw the certainty in his eyes. That is the first time you have said that. I have been waiting for the right moment. And this is it? Random Tuesday afternoon? Every moment with you is the right moment. That is incredibly cheesy. I am incredibly in love. Zora laughed, leaned over and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. I love you too, even though you are bossy and secretive, and you reorganized my entire employment status just to take me on a date. Especially because of that last part, he corrected. Especially because of that, she agreed. Below them, Seoul spread out in all directions, a city of millions, and somehow Zora had found her people in the most unexpected corner of it. A broken man learning to hope again, a silent boy finding his voice, and a woman who ran from grief and found love instead. Not a fairy tale ending, because life was more complicated than that. But a real one, messy and imperfect, and absolutely worth fighting for. And really, what more could anyone ask? She flew 12,000 miles running from grief and walked straight into a broken man, a silent child, and a love she never planned for. But that is the thing about starting over. You rarely end up where you expected. You end up where you were needed. If this story moved you, like this video and subscribe to this channel. We are not done bringing you stories that hit different. And drop in the comments where you are watching from tonight, because this family is everywhere, and we want to hear from every single one of you.